Hello, people of the page. This is January 4th, 2017. This is Ann Rice. And this is our first live stream of 2017. And we want to answer your questions. If you have questions for me, post them in this thread now. And Beckett will read those questions. He's the engineer behind all this magic. And we will be able to answer them right here. The first thing I'd like to address is the question of the Facebook page and its authenticity. Make no mistake, I am Ann Rice. This is my page. When I post here, it is Ann Rice posting. It is not somebody else. We still have people coming along who don't believe this, who think this page is run by somebody else or a group of people, and that I'm not participating. I am participating. And I still get emails from people who don't think I'm going to read their emails. Now, you might ask yourself, why would a person email me when they're convinced I'm not going to read it? I don't know the answer, but it happens just about every few days. Somebody will email me and they'll say, I know you're never going to see this email. Believe me, I see my emails. I'm the only person who sees my emails. Every now and then I will shoot a request for an interview or something like that to Beckett, my beloved assistant, to handle. But in the main, I get the emails, and I am the only one who answers them as Ann Rice, and I do answer them every day. So I want you to be assured of all of that. Absolutely assured. Now, when it comes to your questions, Bex, do we have any questions to answer?
We do have a few questions to get us off, and just to remind you that please post your questions in the comments, and I'll read them to Ann. But Joshua Payton is wondering, and a lot of people are wondering, about Mona and Quinn. Their fate. Okay. People ask about them all the time. Are they feared dead? Are they still alive someplace? Will you address that eventually?
Well, it was addressed in Prince Lestat and the Realms of Atlantis. A report comes to Lestat through Arion that he believes that Mona is dead and that Quinn is dead. But there's no certainty. There's no absolute certainty about either character. They may come back. Now, Mona and Quinn were characters that appeared in what I call the hybrid novels. The novels that included the Mayfair witches as well as the vampires. And I've never been entirely comfortable with those novels, but I'm realizing now that many people valued them more than I realized. There was so much criticism of Blood Canticle at the time that I did not get a realistic picture of how many people did in fact enjoy that novel and do care very much about Mona and Quinn. I got a rather distorted picture of the reception of that novel, unfortunately. And of course, authors should not be responding to these things anyway. They should be writing the very best books they can write, regardless of the response. But inevitably, you're vulnerable to the response. You do form ideas in your mind about how a novel is received, and this is part of being sensitive to what people say and think and how they react. And I'm just now understanding how many people care about Mona and Quinn. It's not certain. It's not certain at all that they are gone.
Michelle Black has questions about pronunciation. She says, will you please pronounce Amel's name? How do you pronounce these names? And I would also say that Atalantaya, would you talk about how these pronunciations?
Sure, I'll pronounce all of it as best I can. Amel is pronounced just like that, Amel. Rashomandis is pronounced that way. Capetria is Capetria. Derek is, of course, Derek. Garrican, Welf. Those are the unusual names of the new characters in the new novel. Let's see what else I can pronounce. Maharet has always been pronounced that way by me, although I've heard it pronounced Maharet, which sounded very beautiful too. Makere is the way the other twins' name was pronounced. Lestat is, of course, Lestat. He was not pronounced Lestat. It's Lestat. And Louis is Louis, the French pronunciation of Louis. Armand is, of course, Armand. Marius is Marius. I'm trying to think. Benji is Benji. Sibel is Sibel. What more can I pronounce? Becca, can you think of any names?
When we were doing the audiobook, the question of Atalantaya came up, and you said it sounds like...
Oh, jambalaya. It's Atalantaya. Atalantaya. The T-A-Y-A at the end is like jambalaya. It's that same type of pronunciation. Atalantaya.
I love that. It's like jambalaya.
Yeah.
You said it. That was great.
I try to compare things. Luricastria is pronounced the way it's written. And if I think of any more, I'll give more pronunciations. I'm delighted to do that.
Please do. Melissa H. Byers asks, I just finished the Atlantis book, loved it. Will you ever go back to the Wolf books at any point?
Oh, I want very much to go back to the Wolf books. I simply haven't had the time. I want to do a third book right away with my gentleman at Nidec Point and my lady up there. And I'm very eager to do that, actually. Thank you for asking that.
Now, Brianna Guthier asks a similar question, but about the Mayfair storyline. Will you go back to that storyline at any time?
I don't have any plans now to do it. I was very happy with the 3 novels as completing the Mayfair saga. And I don't see anything in the hybrid novels that really changed things. Well, I guess it did give some kind of closing to the story, the hybrid novels. But for me, the heart of the Mayfair Chronicles are the 3 novels, The Witching Hour, Lasher, and Tautos. And I would love to see a television series, a very high-quality television series based on The Witching Hour. But I can't say that I see going back to the stories at this point. They're very much connected with New Orleans and with the house I lived in New Orleans, and I haven't been there for 10 years. So it's in the past for me now. But I'm very much looking forward to the TV series. I hope we get one going.
There are numerous questions about the TV series and about your thoughts on certain actors. Now, would you like to talk about certain actors that you think about for these roles at this point, or do you want to hold that for another day?
I do want to talk about the TV series, but we will be talking about it later on the Vampire Chronicles TV page. That's at
2:30 today.
That's at 2:30. But still, I want to answer for people on this page who don't necessarily go to that page. Christopher and I are doing the writing right now for a detailed outline and scripts for at least the first 4 episodes of the first season. And we are outlining, I would say, something like 5 seasons of what we see as the Vampire Chronicles television show. And we're going to do this writing and finish this writing before we actually sit down with production entities who are interested. We've had enormous response to our announcement that we are doing this. Our agents have had enormous response. We have been inundated with very positive feedback from the Hollywood community, and we're very eager to get going on it. We're a long way from casting. But right now, I'll tell you what is happening is people are bringing to my attention actors that I knew nothing about before. And I love these posts, and keep them coming. Keep this coming, pictures of actors whom you've seen in costume dramas in particular, British, Australian, Canadian, American, and keep giving us their pictures and links to what they've done. And I'm loving this, and I don't know how we'll end up with casting, but I guess we'll go for an ensemble of actors who really look like the people in the books and who can sign on to do a series that may go 5, 6, 7 years.
Gary Swafford is asking, have you seen the actor Aaron Taylor Johnson?
Gary, hi. Thank you for that question. I haven't looked him up yet. You sent me an email and asked me about him. I will look him up right away. I'm sorry that I haven't. Listen, Gary, why don't you post a link to pictures of him or something that he's done? Or have I already seen him? Oh, I don't know.
So many,
I'm confused. Yeah. Gary, give us a link on the page with some pictures of him. That would be great. Thank you. And I'll get back to you on that. And I hope you're doing well. And I always love hearing from you, Gary. Garrican in Prince Lestat in the Realms of Atlantis was named for you.
Now, Dana Rubara is a lot of people inquire about Gabrielle because she's a favorite to many, many people. Are asking about Gabrielle. Now, I recently read an argument about Gabrielle, and some people said they think she's autistic or that she used to have autism in any way. So would you comment about maybe another book about Gabrielle or about Gabrielle potentially not having autism?
Well, I've never thought of Gabrielle as being autistic. She's definitely a cold person and a highly intelligent person. She's detached. She was a very cold but extremely loving mother for Lestat in her own way, but she's cold. She doesn't need anybody. And Lestat's had to wrestle with that all his life. He's a son who was loved by his mother. And, Nietzsche says that if your mother loves you, a son who's loved by his mother goes forth a conqueror. Well, that's Lestat for sure. But at the same time, she's very cold. And she doesn't need him. And he's aware of that every minute. And I've never really been moved to write a book from her point of view. At this point, I don't see myself writing any more memoir books, like Blood and Gold, Marius's book, or The Vampire Mind, or Pandora. I want to move forward with the whole tribe, and I want to stay focused on Lestat as the leader of the tribe. I have a lot of stories to tell now with Lestat and with the tribe and with the new immortals that were introduced in this latest book.
A lot of people are asking about the wolves and other characters, and I think you answered a really great question about going back to earlier memoirs, because these books now appear to be addressing or the whole group of vampires.
Yes, so I want to go forward with the tribe.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I enjoyed writing the memoir books, and I loved going into the story of Marius and Armand. They're undoubtedly pillars of the vampire tribe, but I really can't do that for I don't feel inclined to do it for every character. I love giving their lives in bits and pieces in the different books as we move forward. I'd like to include more information about Gregory or Nabamum, and I'd like to include more about Seth, Akasha's son, biological son, who's now part of the Vampire Chronicles, and more about Farid, the Anglo-Indian doctor, who's the scientist of the group. I'd like to get into their lives more, integrated into the story as we move forward. I really want to keep the story of the tribe going. Lestat's passion right now is to keep the court intact. It's to not let it just dissolve the way the Night Island dissolved years ago, or other groups and little covens dissolved. He wants to keep the court for the sake of the entire tribe. And that's very much my focus philosophically, morally, storytelling-wise, fun-wise, Indiana Jones spirited, ambiance-wise, whatever. That's what I want to do. Yeah.
Kim Ulrich is asking, what are your thoughts on Louis? How do you really feel about him?
Ambivalent. Louis was me when I wrote Interview with the Vampire. I was Louis, and that's a dark book. And Louis's quest ends in darkness. And 8 years later, after I wrote that book, I wrote The Vampire Lestat, and I somehow became Lestat. And Lestat's quest has not ended in darkness and is still going. So there'll always be this ambivalence in me toward Louis, because Louis was a former self of me. A former self.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved Louis, and I loved having him in the realms of Atlantis very, very much. But it's a character I have trouble going back and embracing because I'm not him anymore.
In a sense, was it therapeutic for you writing Interview with the Vampire?
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Angela Longfelt asks, where do you come up with the names of your characters?
You know, it gets harder and harder as you go on. In the beginning, it was easy. I had so many favorite names, I could just pick them out of the air. Armand, Louis, Lestat, I don't know, they were everywhere. Now I have to work at it. I have to think, and I like to think of unique names, especially for immortal characters like Capetria or Welf. And I do a lot of searching for names. I read history all the time, archaeology, nonfiction, and I jot down names in the back of the books I read. And they can be the names in footnotes, the names in the bibliography, historical names, names of cities. I use a lot of names of cities. I got the name Akasha off a map of Africa. It was the name of a city in Africa. And I have to have the name of a character before I can really work with the character or be the character or write through the eyes of the character. So that can hang me up for days. And many names, of course, have been swallowed whole by other fantasy, fiction, television, games, video games, imaginative worlds, and so forth. So that's a problem, too.
Kevin Cross Wood is asking about Interview with the Vampire, and since we just asked about that, it seems like a pretty good question. That Interview has a different feel and pace than the other books. If you were to write it now, do you think you would do anything differently?
Well, I can't imagine writing it now. It's just impossible to think about that because it was so much part of the time. It was the absolute summit of whatever ability I had at that time to write a novel.
And would you say your summit has grown? Or,
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I think every author hopes that he or she grows as he or she goes along. But you don't know. I mean, one of the strange things about me as a writer is that there's no consensus among my readers about what's the best book I ever wrote. There's no consensus that Interview with the Vampire is the best one, or that Memnoch the Devil is the worst, for example, or that the Vampire Lestat, say, is the best. I mean, you ask different people, you hear different things. If I open a thread and say to you, what novel do you love the most? There'll be a lot of people saying Memnoch the Devil, a lot of people saying Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned, even people saying Tale of the Body Thief, Interview with the Vampire. So, I don't know. I can't think in terms of what I would do differently. It's a full expression of what I felt at that time.
Yeah. If you could go back in time and sit with yourself in 1974 and you now, what would you say to her? Would you give her advice? Would you just let her flow?
Oh, I would. My advice would be stick with your vision. That's always my advice. But I might also secretly think it's too dark. But do what you're doing.
Switching gears for a moment, Roxanne Acosta asks, the way you describe Amel talking to Lestat, is it the way Lestat speaks to you? Is it kind of a similar voice?
In some ways. I mean, Lestat is, of all the characters I've ever written about, he's the one that seems absolutely real and as if he's being channeled from someplace else. And yeah, he speaks to me, and you could say that his relationship with Amel is a metaphor for my relationship with him. Yes, yeah, he's inside me, and he's not going anywhere either. Now that he's back, he's been back since about 2013, and he's not going anywhere.
I think one of the favorite things I've ever heard you say to me was that when you walk into a department store, you think, how would Lestat feel about shampoo bottles?
Oh yeah,
lined up and
whenever I very seldom actually go into all-night drugstores and markets, and I recently went into the Bristol Farms market here, and it was like a psychedelic experience. I hadn't been in such a place in years. I send out for everything I need. So anyway, I walk into it, I think, my God, the 21st century, look at this. Think what Lestat would think about the sheer beauty of the fruit and the meat and the baked goods. This is like a vision. Think of Louis XIV walking through this market. I mean, we have wealth today of which former centuries couldn't even dream, and we're not aware of that. We're not aware of, Lestat says it in The Tale of the Body Thief when he does go to an all-night drugstore. He said it was just filled with all kinds of products that Louis XIV could never have had or dreamed of having, and they were everywhere. I love all that.
Well, Brian Williams asks, he wants to know about your writing schedule. How many hours a day do you devote to writing, or how many days a week?
Well, I don't write every day, that's for sure. And one of the most damaging things ever said to me as a young writer was that I wasn't a real writer because I didn't write every day. Well, I still have anger and hostility about that one. But when I am actually writing, when I'm writing my book, I put in as many hours as possible. I usually start late morning and go all afternoon and sometimes into the evening. As the book really starts rolling, I start writing more. I get up wanting to know what's going to happen next and get to the keyboard as fast as I can, and I will write late into the night. I can't really do all-nighters and 24 hours again like I did when I was younger. I just can't do it. I get too physically exhausted from that and too strung out. But I did write both Christ the Lord Out of Egypt and Christ the Lord, The Road to Cana during all-night sessions when I slept in the day. I couldn't get into the world of Jesus Christ as I saw it without removing myself completely from the world. And it took me months to recover from both of those books to get back on a sensible clock. Does that answer that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I was reading another question. What do you, let's see, it's Anna Counts asks, what do you miss about New Orleans? Food?
Oh, gosh, everything.
Huh.
I guess the happiness of the people. The people in New Orleans are just downright happy people. They really enjoy life. They know how to live life. They love life. And life itself is so good in New Orleans that you don't need to do much else except be part of life. I mean, if it's not St. Patrick's Day, it's St. Joseph's Day. If it's not Jazz Fest, it's Mardi Gras. If it's not Mardi Gras, it's Lent. If it's not, if your umpteen million cousins are not having birthdays for their 1 and 2 and 3-year-old children, birthdays to which 20, 30, 40, 50 adults are going, it's not New Orleans. I mean, you have to accommodate life there in every project that you do. If you hire a contractor to work on your house, you have to accommodate the birthdays in his family, that he's going to have to go see his mama if she's sick, that he's going to have to go there for dinner, you know, and that there's liable to be a funeral if his Uncle Jack dies. And, you know, this is all part of life there. And I miss that terribly. I miss that, those vintage lifestyles. When you live in California, it's a very invigorating, very creative, very fast-paced culture, but it's a culture in which lifestyles are acquired and developed. But down in New Orleans, lifestyles are inherited, and they have a beauty like vintage wine. I imagine, I haven't had a drink since 1979, but I do remember the taste of really good Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's what life is like in New Orleans.
What's your favorite New Orleanian meal?
Favorite meal?
Yeah, favorite meal from New Orleans.
Gosh, I guess I would say gumbo. You know, a really good seafood gumbo, or even chicken gumbo. That would be my favorite meal. Shrimp Creole would be next. There are other meals I'm forgetting. There are some great Italian restaurants in New Orleans. They're really great Italian restaurants.
Jasmine McDonald is asking about your research. How much time do you spend researching?
I research all the time because it's what I enjoy doing. I just ordered a bunch of books on 18th century Paris that I'm rereading just for kicks. Books about the theaters of Paris and the Commedia dell'arte in Paris. And I love doing research of that kind. I just naturally read a lot of nonfiction. I read much more nonfiction than fiction. And I'm constantly taking notes and inspired by what I read. Anybody who follows the page knows that we get a lot of articles on the page about archaeology, archaeological finds. Linda Sejovic, our wonderful participant on the page, is Granny Goodwitch, who is always giving us great archaeological articles to talk about. This is something I love. I do a lot of archaeological reading all the time. This is like eating ice cream for me. I enjoy this. And so research is just never ending.
There are numerous questions about the Christ the Lord series. Will you ever finish it? How would you ever go back to it, or maybe the Angel Time books?
I certainly want to go back to the Angel Time books. I want to do a third book with Toby O'Dare and his angel friend Malchiah for sure. I've got that book planned. I've had it planned for years. I just haven't gotten to it. It includes a romping escapade in the Middle Ages, and Toby really getting more deeply involved in the Middle Ages than he ever got involved in the other periods in the first two novels. But I don't think I'll go back to the Christ the Lord series. I'm really very proud and grateful for those two books. They represent my 2-volume reflection on the private life of the Lord, and I'd like to keep it at that. I don't see that the world needs the type of book I would have to write if I were to go on with Jesus' ministry and the crucifixion. It would not be the same type of book that those two books are. Those two books are Orthodox books. They fit very, very neatly with Orthodox Christianity. And I'm very proud of them, but I can't continue with Christ's life in that way. I am no longer a Christian, really. My love for Jesus transcends every problem I ever encountered with the Christian belief system, every argument, every theological dispute. But I'm not really a Christian anymore, and I can't go on. Guys, we're going to have to close this out. I've enjoyed this so much, but now we have to go over to the Vampire Chronicles page. And we're going to go over there, and we're going to answer questions about the series. I hope some of you will join us. We'll be up there in about 5 minutes.